Okay, welcome into the DAV Podcast, episode number 4. 20 Too Many is our episode today. I'm Dan Klaskins along with Ashley Burns. We're back with you here and excited to be back talking about some important issues in the veterans community. We do it all the time here on our podcast. And if you're interested in catching up on some of the episodes you missed, following along, you can do so. Subscribe to the podcast. Do it on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and Stitcher too. You can find it dav.org/podcast. And Ashley, I'm excited to be back with you for another episode. And man, the DAV podcast has been nice, but a lot of good things going on here at DAV for folks. Maybe they're catching in to us for the first time here. Let's talk a little bit about what DAV does to help veterans.
Yeah, so DAV is here for veterans of all generations, all branches. What we do is really provide these wraparound support services for veterans. So if you need help with your claims for benefits, anything through the VA, for healthcare, if you're looking for employment, we can help you with that. If you're looking for ways to volunteer, we have opportunities available. So there's really a whole host of things that we do in addition to, just being a member and being among your people, so to speak, within your own community, enjoying that camaraderie with your fellow veterans.
Yeah, and through our mission, just empowering veterans through our free programs and services, we help over 1 million veterans every single year. We couldn't do it without the support of our generous donors, though. And really, that is what drives our organization and all the things we can do to help veterans. So if you want to help us help veterans, you can do so by donating at dav.org. If you need help and you are a veteran or a family member or resource, find help at dav.org as well. And one of the big issues facing veterans right now, a growing epidemic indeed, is veteran suicide. 20 veterans a day die by suicide. That is one every 72 minutes. And the time you're going to the grocery store, you go out to lunch today, a veteran's dying by suicide. The rate of suicide, 1.8 times higher in veteran women than in non-veterans. A lot of stats out there. Ashley, I know it's an important issue for us here at DAV and for the entire veterans community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you mentioned the 20 veterans a day, which of course it's a national epidemic. It's a tragedy when you think about these people who have given so much to serve our country and that somehow we're not able to help them in their time of need. But the interesting thing there that we've talked about before is that out of those 20, that's 14 veterans who have had little or no contact with VA in recent months. So we know just how important getting that right help is for veterans.
Indeed. And I think there's a lot of suicide issues beyond just this community, obviously. And that's why there's places and all kinds of resources now. And it's a good thing to get help, but we need to let people out there that need the help know how to get it. And the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, they provide free assistance and confidential support for people in distress, prevention and crisis resources for you or your loved ones, and best practices for professionals. You can call them. We'll throw out this number throughout the episode here today, 1-800-273-8255. That's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And in terms of veteran-specific issues, the VA Veterans Crisis Line is also a tremendous resource, Ashley.
Yeah, and they've been doing this work since 2007. Really, they're the gold standard in being able to respond to veterans' crisis. Since they began, I think they've answered something like 3.9 million phone calls. They've conducted about 600,000 online chats and text responses. And then really, most importantly, they've also dispatched services about 120,000 times to veterans who actually are in crisis at the moment. And really exciting that there's some new legislation that DAV is supporting called the Suicide Prevention by Eliminating Excessive Digits, or SPEED Act, which actually would pare that down to a simple 3-digit number for veterans to reach in crisis. So just like a 911 for veterans who are in distress. And like I said, DAV's put its full support behind this legislation. So we're hoping to see some movement on that here in the near future. But getting back into the episode, later we're going to hear from General Mark Graham about another resource that's out there for veterans, Vets for Warriors. But up first, Dan's going to go ahead and introduce us to Lorraine Eads, the widow of Army veteran Ronson Eads.
Yes, and suicide, it takes a life of just one person. The ripple effect of that life lost is much larger, however. And in the fall of 2011, Lorraine Eads was a young wife and a mother who had just learned she was pregnant again. She never had her chance to tell her husband Ronson the good news, though. days before Thanksgiving, Ronson Aaron Eads, 27, a combat veteran of Afghanistan, committed suicide. The young veteran had battled PTSD since his deployment, where he lost good friends. Lorraine, also just 27, she felt lost, and for the story, for her, it would continue. I recently sat down with her to talk about that emotional journey she has traveled, and she also offered some valuable insight for others struggling with similar issues.
Lorraine, I definitely want to take the time and just thank you once again for joining us to share your story and to really let others know out there that could be facing some of these same issues. They're not alone. And that's really important. And I just want to once again thank you for doing that.
It's my pleasure to help.
Let's take it back to the very beginning for you and Ronson. You met him while you were attending Indiana University in his hometown of Bloomington, Indiana. What was it about your husband that really just drew you to him right from the beginning?
He had this fire in his spirit. He was more outgoing and social than I ever was. And he was very charismatic. He always had a smile. So I was kind of really quiet and timid when I first met him. Because of him, I got brought out of my shell. His personality just immediately drew me.
And young kids with so much in front of you, falling in love in college. What were you actually in school studying?
I was studying history. I intended on being a lawyer at first, but then plans changed. I ended up, once we got together and stuff, I ended up being pregnant, so I went to switch majors. And then he joined the Army. So things just went rapid in the first couple of years.
For Ronson, it seemed like joining the Army was something he always wanted to do.
Yeah, even before I met him, he had talked about it for years to a lot of his friends and some of his family. And he was very adamant about serving his country. He felt called to do it. And then once we got together, I remember one night I was working at Fridays, and I was newly pregnant with our daughter, and he said, we need to talk about something. I'm like, okay, of course, me pregnant, thinking it's a million and one things. And he asked if it was okay if he joined the Army, and I was like, wait, is that it? And he goes, yes, that's it. And I said, I don't care. I was like, we'll follow you wherever you want to go. So he was very determined to serve his country.
And so you guys shortly thereafter got married, and it was literally right after that he went off to Fort Leonard Wood in St. Louis, but you stayed behind in Bloomington. Was that tough for you?
Yeah, it was. It was a friend of mine actually moved in with me to help me out and stuff because I was pregnant, and she helped out a lot, but it was hard, him being away. I mean, that was the first experience I ever had of him being gone, for not being able to talk. We only could write letters when they're in basic and training, so you really get letters in between. That's how we discussed on what we were going to name our daughter. So it took us 2 weeks before we actually got a name in between letters. So it was very hard.
Haley was born, he was able to be there, right?
Yes, he was able to come home. It was actually right before graduation, and because she was born June 23rd, and he got into town late June 22nd. Thanks to the Red Cross and stuff, they have these things set in place so soldiers can come home, and then it's just kind of based on travel and stuff if they get there in time, and he was able to make it in time.
That's awesome.
And then the following week, at some point, I think Haley was only 5 days old, and we were cleared to travel, and we went to his graduation the following week. So she was just 5 days old at his graduation.
Wow. And the timing of it was great there. And it wasn't long after that Ronson was stationed in Bamberg, Germany. And that's when you guys followed him. You spent quite a bit of time there with him. Talk about your time as a family stationed over in Germany.
We spent about 3 years over there. When we first arrived, Haley was just 3 months old. So it was kind of interesting to have an infant, and a whole new country. With the post and stuff, you have like what a commissary, so it was easy to get anything we needed. So I wasn't worried about reading stuff in German. It was like, oh, is this okay? So we had all kinds of access to things on post. And then he left for trainings quite often, and then he served a 15-month tour in Afghanistan. I think that was like the hardest part because I spent the majority of that staying in Germany, home for the holidays, but that was about it.
In Afghanistan, it was after Ronson came home from there that it really became a different story for your family, wasn't it?
Yes. He went from like we hardly ever fought, and if we did, it was something major. It wasn't, like silly things that people fight over in marriages. Like we didn't do that. We just talked it out. And then when he came home, some nights it was like a flip of a switch. You never knew what you were going to get. Like if he was going to be raging mad or be the Ronson I once knew. And it just all stemmed from losing his friends in Afghanistan. It did a number on him.
Yeah, in 2009, he was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and so many of our soldiers coming home have this PTSD to deal with. Coming in here and, as you said, a completely different person, the personality just flipping instantly, and it gets pretty scary. And it got real scary for you and your family when Ronson actually tried his first attempt at suicide.
Yeah, we left Germany, and I want to say it was about 2010. I just know it was late in the year, and we were living in Virginia. We were stationed at Fort Lee, and one night he just tried to end his life. And it was about hours of trying to talk him out of it, and it took a soldier friend that was actually stationed with him in Germany that came to Virginia that talked him out of it.
Wow. That's a pretty good friend to come that way. And how long of a time was that friend there with you?
Well, she was stationed there as well. So we I can't remember who went to Virginia first, but we basically followed each other. We're in Germany, and then we all went to Virginia, and she was like an aunt to my kids. We've lost contact over the years, but she was pretty much a very part of our lives during the time.
It wasn't too long later that another attempt would come, and this time Ronson would be successful in taking his life. And that is something that is hard for a lot of people to understand, but having lived through it and lived with it since, sure, you're still trying to understand parts of it. What about that time stands out to you as like that moment where it really all sunk in and you were helpless, right?
I had family, of course, and I had resources kind of like in that aspect, but it wasn't in the financial need that would have met, not having him. Then like insurance, I had a good job at the time, but it was factory work. I was not happy there. And I was also pregnant with our son, which I didn't find out till about a week after the funeral. So it was just like a roller coaster, really, that I was like, something needs to give. I can't be working 6-7 days a week in a factory job to make ends meet and be pregnant and take care of our daughter. That's
a lot for any person to handle. Ronson, he left behind a note, and that's where that the level of the deep pain that he was dealing with come to life in that note, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. It really put it basically on paper, literally, that how hard he dealt with losing his friends and what it did to him. And no matter how hard we tried to get him help, and I tried to push for him to get help, it seemed like he kept getting turned away. And then there was other avenues that he didn't even pursue, which I think he just felt like there just was no help. He thought he would get the same answers he got before.
It's got to feel like a very helpless situation. But you, after things eventually settled, you did find some help. You met a guy, a DAV life member
that was
Mm-hmm.
from Indiana as well, and Chuck Welch. And Chuck was familiar with your story and saw how strong of a person you were, and the circumstance that came along, and he became a friend to you, didn't he?
Yes, Chuck actually knew one of Ronson's sisters and her husband, and that's how we got in contact. And then after I met with him, he brought me to Don Inns at DAV, and from there it just kind of took off. DAV really stepped in. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. I'd probably still be at my factory job trying to make ends meet. Probably not enjoying my job, but we're also looking at hopefully getting a house soon, which that's something I didn't foresee happening anytime. All of his 3 children are thriving. They don't need nothing as far as basic needs go.
Yeah, and I think the lesson here for people is help is there. I'm DAV. I mean, we say we definitely do help 1 million veterans every year, but we also help their family members and the stuff and filing the claims. And it was Don Inns helping you file that claim.
Yes.
And it opened up the door that things you never even knew that you were eligible for through this. And as you said, it was really life-changing for you, for Ronson's children. Lorraine, I mean, as time goes by now, this Thanksgiving will mark 8 years since all of this, and you're out here still just sharing this story with others. What really is the motivator to you to get your story out there and to let it be told? What message are you wanting others to hear?
Well, I have 2 parts to my message. The first part is for military personnel to know that there is hope. There is other avenues. There's something better than doing a permanent solution to temporary issues. There's so much help out there that if they would only realize how permanent this solution is and what damage it does, maybe it'll help deter more. It affects so many lives that I don't think some think about in the moment. It affects not only your family, your loved ones, your kids, if you have kids. It affects people that you just touch their lives and you don't even realize.
It's a ripple effect for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, every life touches so many others.
Yes. And I feel like if they know how much impact they really have, that their life does matter, to get help, take every avenue possible. There's no need to go at it the permanent way. For part 2 of it, it's for families and spouses like me, and men and women both that are in this situation. There's help out there for you. DAV helps with so much. They don't just help with some of the finances. They can help you get in contact with people that help dealing with the loss. You have insurance, you have schooling for the kids, even yourself. I mean, there's all kinds of avenues that just they take away some of the stresses that you have when you lose that loved one, and just make it easier to mend and cope and get through it.
Lorraine, I'm so glad that you were able to get the help that you deserved, and we wish that Ronson could have got the help that he deserved. But hopefully with you joining us here and sharing your story, other veterans will know that it's never too late to get help. And for the widows that have been left behind by the veterans that have died by suicide, obviously realize they can get help too. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I know it's never probably easy to tell, but we're forever grateful for you sharing it. And I really do wish you the very best.
Thank you. I am honored to help in any way I can.
And now to speak to the issue of survivor guilt, we know that for those who've lost a loved one to suicide, they're often susceptible to feelings that somehow they're at fault for what's happened, that they didn't see the signs, or they should have acted sooner or listened more. But I think it's very important to know that you're not responsible for what's taken place, and to know that there are, in fact, resources available to you. And that includes free bereavement counseling for any family member through local VA vet centers. So please, if you're dealing with this, I would encourage you to go online and look up your local vet center and see if you can arrange to get some one-on-one counseling. Military One Source also has some great information available on their website, but really just the important thing is not to blame yourself. I can't imagine how difficult that time must be, but it's a very important thing to remember, and to take care of yourself both physically and emotionally. And we know that there are a lot of people out there who have struggled with this, who have dealt with this, and who have turned around and done something positive with that traumatic experience. And one of those people is General Mark Graham. He's the director of Vets for Warriors, which is a 24/7 peer support program that connects vets and their families to resources right in their own community. They offer confidential online chat and phone lines that are open all day, every day. And anyone who dials in is guaranteed to reach a trained veteran or member of the military community. General Graham's work is motivated by his own experiences in the military, as a veteran, and as a father who lost both of his sons within roughly a year of each other to two very different battles. So our own Mary Deaver sat down with General Graham to talk deeper about how he's helping to tackle veteran suicide.
So you came into this, you have a very powerful story. I read your, I've heard you speak previously, your Humans of New York story, and then you speak on your story quite often. Tell me about that. What is that story?
Yeah, thanks. We, my wife and I lost two sons, and our daughter lost two brothers. I was a colonel in the Army and stationed in Korea, and our oldest son, Kevin, was at the University of Kentucky studying to be an Army doctor. He was a senior Army ROTC cadet, scholarship student, and he was struggling with depression. He didn't want anyone to know about it because we think he was probably ashamed of it or felt like it was a character flaw or something. And, that was in 2003. And Kevin took his own life and died by suicide in summer of 2003 in June because he had come off his medication. And because he didn't want the Army to know he was on medication. He was getting ready to go to ROTC advanced camp. And, we were part of the stigma. We think a lot of that was the stigma that he felt bad about himself, that, he needed medication to feel better. And sadly, in hindsight, we all learn a lot, and we don't think we were probably there for Kevin as much as we should have been, and we didn't understand enough about it. So we've really continued to help make sure that everyone knows it's so important to know that depression is an illness. It's a real thing. It's not just a sad feeling, but there's help. I mean, there's help and there's hope. We didn't know he was struggling that bad. We knew he had something was going on, but we had no idea it could be life-threatening. And then 7 months after Kevin died, our oldest son, Jeff, was killed in Iraq by an IED. He was a lieutenant armor officer, and he was on a foot patrol in Chaldea outside of Fallujah, and was leading his men across the bridge. And he stopped because something didn't look right on the bridge, and he stopped his platoon. And as he approached the bridge, an IED was set off by cell phone. And he and a specialist, Roger Ling from New York City, were killed on the bridge. So we lost both our sons, and our sons died fighting different battles. Our son Jeffrey was fighting an enemy in a faraway land, but our son Kevin was fighting the battle of his mind. So if you're struggling out there and you're sad, you're having those feelings, if you're having suicidal thoughts, if you're having depressions, if you're feeling lonely and sad and you're feeling like you're isolated, please call us. Call Vets for Warriors, 855-838-8255, 24 hours a day. I wish my son Kevin had a phone line he could have called.
Who's answering those phones? You said veterans, peers. Who have you hired, and who is really the heart and soul of the organization?
I have to. And thank you for asking that, because I talk on the phone a lot, but I don't answer many peer calls. I'm fortunate to work with a bunch of great Americans who are from Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps, male, female veterans, every era from Vietnam all the way up to Iraq and Afghanistan, and the current operations going on around the world. So we have all kinds of veterans. So we connect you to, when you call in, you talk to one of our peers, and then if that connection works well, you stay with that peer. Our supervisors and clinicians look at that, and they make sure we match you up, and then you have a peer that you continue to stay with. So we don't change the peer all the time. Once you're connected to someone and that's working, we have that peer stay with you. So they're the ones that are calling back and following up. And we typically call you back every week early on, and then depends on how things are going. We might we talk to this together. We might start calling you every couple of weeks or every once a month for a period until you say, hey, I'm doing better. Thanks for the help and support, and And we always tell them, look, don't forget, 24 hours a day, you can always call us. You can always reach back out to us.
What kind of training do they get when they come on board?
Yeah, they get, we use a model called reciprocal peer support. By the way, is now an evidence-based practice and model. It received the American Psychiatric Association Award for Service Innovation in October of last year. So when they come on board, they get 40 hours of didactic training. Our clinicians lead our training. They also get trained, on a lot of things like systems and how to use those. But the focus of the training is how do you answer how do you answer a call? So customer service. Make sure we're welcoming when you call. And I have to tell you, it doesn't take long. They all serve. They get it. So we say it's shared lived experiences. Our model's based on strength. You served, I served, or you're serving, and I served. And so we have a commonality there, and we've lived through the same things. So it's a shared lived experience that's key. And so we make a quick connection. And I think one of the things we find very quickly is there's a trust there. One of the main surprises when people call us, we answer the phone live, and within 30 seconds, and then to find out that they're talking to a veteran. And we're working right now to bring on more family members so families can call us. Because families can call us now, but we want to make sure we get the word out better to let families know you can call too. And we're working right now to bring on some family member peers to make sure as they call in, they might talk to a veteran initially, but then we connect them with a family member peer that'll follow up and work with them.
Well, that's exactly what your tagline, discover the power of connection. Connection is such an important part, not only for mental health reasons, but for military families who pick up and move every couple of years and things like that. So how is the power of connection essential for veterans struggling, their families who they might be struggling themselves? Why is that so essential for health?
Yeah, great point. And I'll tell you, that's not the tagline I had. When I got there, I changed the tagline. And we used it for a while, but then the peers came to me and said, hey, we want to change the tagline. So I said, okay, what should it be? And the peers came up with that line. The peers came up with the discover the power of connection, because it's all about connection. And I think one of the things we see in veterans, and sometimes people ask me about suicides and why are veterans suicides. When you're in the military, people ask often, do you miss the Army? Do you miss the military? And what I find, I answer the question, I think the same way so many do, is you miss the people. It's the people. Yeah, you served and you're proud of your service, but you miss the people of it. It's the connection with the people. So I think when you separate from the military, whether you retire or whether you served and you get out of the military, there's that connectedness that you lose, and you miss that. And sometimes you don't, it's hard to make that connectedness again. So discover the power connection is the game changer. It is the difference in helping people get through whatever they're going through. To know, one is, you're not the only one going through this. There are so many others that are struggling and have gone through this, but you can get through it. There's hope. There is hope. And there's someone out there that can help support you, what you're going through. It's a sign of strength, not weakness, to reach out.
The veteran population compared to the civilian population has a much higher number of suicides. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think a couple things. One is the stigma is still pretty strong. And in the military, of course, when you served, and thank you for your service, and the military is a tough occupation, if you will. It's a tough career field, or whatever we want to call it, I guess. But people say, well, they volunteered. And I often say it, when people tell me that, I go, well, aren't you glad they did? So I think going into the military, most folks have something that's going on in their life, and so you're bringing it to the military. When you get in the military, it's tough. The stressors, even if you've not deployed, it's a dangerous business. All the branches of the military. Think about it: airplanes, ships, tanks. All artillery pieces, weapons, everything. It's a very dangerous business. So I think one is trauma. And many things can be traumatic that some would never imagine that would be traumatic. But I think trauma, and first off, I am not a doctor or a licensed clinician. I'm an Army guy. And I think trauma plays into it a lot of what people have gone through. Certainly multiple deployments. There's different things that have gone in their life there that brings back. But I think just military life in general. And I think so much of it comes down to connection. I think when you leave the military and you're a veteran, you oftentimes feel like you're kind of out there on your own. And we get a lot of callers that say they're feeling all alone. We don't want any veteran to feel alone. That's why we call us, you're never alone. We're there 24/7. So I think, and like you said, no one's really solved it or figured it out. I know there's so many people working on it and have been for years. But I think the connectedness piece is huge. And I do. The stigma, we're going to keep working on the stigma. But the invisible wounds are tough. And I think the more we can open up this and get rid of the stigma and eliminate it, the more we'll find that that mental health care is like health care. It should be. You go to your dentist every year, you go to your doctor. Mental health care should be health care.
Do you get a chance very often to talk to families of people who have committed suicide? And if you do, what do you say?
Well, I do, and sadly the number keeps growing, and I do. And one thing I tell them is I certainly tell them I'm sorry for their loss, but I also tell them that there's hope, and it depends on how far they are in their journey after the loss of suicide, because there's a lot of guilt, and there'll always be a lot of guilt if you've lost someone to suicide, whether it's a family member or a close friend or a comrade you serve with or someone. But we tell them there is hope. And I also tell them that, the hole in your heart won't ever go away all the way. I think it might get smaller over time, but it never goes away. And remember the good times and remember the happy times together with that person. And know that they were struggling. And I mean, again, I'm not a doctor, but I also try to help encourage them to know that it's not them. I mean, somebody that dies by suicide is in such pain inside their own mind that they're looking to get out of the pain, and that it takes one step at a time, 1 minute at a time initially, and then gradually it gets to an hour and maybe a day. I mean, my wife and I, we live one day at a time still, and our son died in 2003, both of our sons, but Kevin's dying by suicide 2003. You think, I've had people say to me, gosh, aren't you past that? I mean, I literally have had people say that to me, like, gosh, haven't you moved past that yet? And I look at them and say, no. I'll never really get all the way past it, ever. I mean, I have wonderful memories of my son, but I'll always grieve my son. I mean, always. And so I just reinforce that with families, that one is grieving is important. It's important to grieve. But that hopefully that my wife and I and our daughter, frankly, that can show there is hope. I mean, there is hope. It is a process and it's hard, but there is hope. And get help. There's help out there, professional help. Get help. Don't think that you're going to, please don't think you're going to be able to do it on your own, because I think that would really be tough. And getting some help to work your way through, it's really important. And there's a lot of organizations out there that help, and a lot of professionals that are there to assist.
Ideally, what would it look like 5 years from now as far as the stigma and the resources and the openness about people talking about mental health care and suicide prevention? Like, what do you hope? What is the goal? Like, how can we as a society make this number go down?
Yeah, so let me give you an example of that. So I'm on blood pressure medicine, and if I tell somebody, I'm on blood pressure medicine, they don't think a thing about it. Oh, well, good, I'm glad you're getting the best care possible. But oftentimes what I'll say is if I told you I was on depression medication, would you react differently? And I say, don't answer that, but would you react differently? And I always tell, even when I speak in a group, I'll say, I suspect many of you would react differently to me telling you I was on depression medicine than blood pressure medicine or cholesterol medicine or whatever. I think one way to know that we've turned the corner and really know is when people will not react adversely or differently when you're on medication for depression or any kind of mental health illness than they do any other kind of illness. I mean, oftentimes you hear people say, I can't see a clinician because they're not a veteran. Well, you go to an orthopedist and we probably don't ask them if they're a veteran. Or you go to another doctor and I don't hear people saying, well, that doctor's not a veteran, but we seem to ask, we want veterans in the clinical world for mental health. And they're professionals. I mean, so I think one is we need to trust them in what they do. They trust us in the military to do our jobs right. I think we need to trust them. So I think we will know we've turned the corner when people can talk about it and not get the reaction that we typically get even today. And to know that, when you're standing in a group of people and you say, like you can say, oh yeah, who's your dentist, who's your doctor, who's your clinician, and people don't flinch at that. They don't react to it. It's like, oh, okay. Or you say, I don't have a clinician. Oh, really? You don't have a clinician yet? Why? How come? Well, let me give you some names of some really good ones, so that it'll be a part of our health. It'll be part of our health care.
Active duty members. Do you think there's changes happening or changes that should be happening to help with those who might still be on active duty?
Excuse me. Yeah, I know people are working on this hard. I know they are, and it's tough. But I think one of the challenges is to be as consistent as we can. Because if you're stationed in one place and the climate there and the environment there is very supportive. But then if you move to another location and the climate there is a little different, then we're confusing service members. So I think we need to work hard to make sure we're very consistent throughout the services as you move from place to place, that it's consistent, that the message is consistent and the care is consistent, so that I know, hey, I'm doing well here. I can talk about this, but when I go to another place, if I start talking about it, I start getting a different response or a different reaction. That can really have the inverse effect we want. So I think to me that in the active duty side, I know everybody's working on it hard. I think that's something that they could look at to ensure. And maybe it's happening. Maybe it's happening really well. But I think that's something to just verify to make sure that isn't the case.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Well, I'd like to thank you, Mary, and the DAV for doing this and for helping us get the word out. And know this is Suicide Prevention Month, and there are a lot of resources out there. Please don't be overwhelmed by them. Connect to Vets for Warriors, 1-855-838-8255. Please put it in your cell phone as a contact. Call us anytime.
Okay, thank you, Mary. And it's really great to see General Mark Graham doing something so positive with the tragedy that he faced. And really, we're just hoping that by talking about this and continuing to share information, not only can we start denting into that 20 veterans a day that die by suicide, but we can even start by saving just one life and sharing information. And once again, we threw out a lot of different stuff here on today on different resources to get that help. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, that number is 1-800-273-8255. You can also, the Veteran Crisis Line. Ashley talked about some cool legislation coming up that hopefully makes this even simpler. But the VA, you can dial that number, 1-800-273-8255. Press 1. You can talk to somebody, or you can send a text message to 838-2555. And then, of course, the Vets for Warriors with General Mark Graham and all the information he sat out there. Another great resource. And Ashley, we don't care how you get the help. We just hope you do. And DAV, we're here to help veterans in as many ways as we can.
Exactly, 100%. If you're in crisis, if you need help, we've provided some resources for you. You can always get in touch with your local DAV. There are veterans there ready and willing to help you with anything you could need, or even the national organization. Reach out to DAV.org. Look for us online, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and we're certainly there whenever you need us.
Definitely do that. And as we said earlier in the episode, we couldn't help veterans without your help. So for all the generous supporters that have supported DAV for nearly 100 years, and if you want to join us in supporting our nation's heroes, you can do so by also donating at DAV.org. Our podcast, keep up with that. A lot of good stuff coming ahead. You can subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and Stitcher, among some. You can find it anytime, DAV.org/podcast. And Ashley, I'm getting excited. Another great episode ahead in episode number 5.
Yeah, we've got some interesting stuff coming up. We'll talk about how individuals, strangers really, have been keeping the memory of Vietnam missing in action alive for decades through a unique program that was started during the Vietnam War. We'll also talk about why it's so important for family members of those who are still missing to get their genetic samples on file with the Department of Defense to help in aiding those repatriation missions. And we'll speak with Ann Mills Griffiths, who's the CEO of the National League of POW MIA Families, whose brother's remains were recovered some 40 years after he went missing in Vietnam. And it's stories like Ann's that are really a reminder of why we still focus on these efforts. There's certainly not as many POW MIA cases as there are today as there were back in Vietnam and Korea, but it's just a reminder of why these missions are so still important. So lots of great stuff coming up in the next episode.
Yeah, and if you missed episode 1, still out there, Live Day, great story of Jim Searsley, Gary Sinise in that one. Episode 2, Woody Williams, Medal of Honor. We also featured our Camp Corral Just Be Kids Scholarship Program, talking to the campers there. And of course, episode 3, one of my favorites, Miracles from the Mountainside, the Winter Sports Clinic. So you can catch up, get caught up. We'll be back with episode 5 real soon. For Ashley Burns and all of us here at DAV, Disabled American Veterans, I'm Dan Klaskins. We'll see you next time right here on the DAV Podcast.